Om Shanti, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Q&A session with Sister Denise. So many of us from the call are those from the retreat who had joined the Anubhuti retreat last week, and one of our Q&A sessions could not be held, and we're making up for that Q&A session. So some of the questions that you had asked during the retreat will be answered by Sister Denise. Plus, we will have some new questions to ask her too. So Sister Denise, a warm welcome and over to you.
Thank you very much. It's delightful to be with you and everyone. Good to see everyone again, even though it's virtual reality, but we're quite used to that now.
So, Sister Denise, some of the questions which were asked during the retreat, would you first like to share on those?
Yeah, let me ask you to take them one by one because it was quite a wide spectrum. And these are questions that people ask often in the about 45, 46 years that I've been doing this practice. The questions, these exact questions keep coming up again and again and again. And I think that there are some very specific reasons why they keep coming up. Okay, Sneha, please go ahead with question number one.
Okay, so these were questions that came from the retreat, and I'll just combine a few of them together. So maybe you can just answer it all at once, for all these questions. So one is, why do we offer bhog? And how do we give sakash to the world?
Well, yes, it's interesting that you put those two together in one question. Why do we offer bhog? Bhog means the offering of food which is prepared in God's remembrance. And we offer it as a gesture to make it clear to ourselves and those who are with us that the provider, the one who is sustaining us, is God. And that it is actually the thought of many people that I am looking after myself and I depend on myself. And in that way, they kind of take God out of the picture. But it's a very, very good way of acknowledging and affirming that I am in relationship with God. God is my sustainer and provider. And we're also acknowledging it to God and really much including him in our day-to-day life. Also, you would not offer anything that's not pure food to God. So he doesn't want us to offer anything that's not pure food to our own selves. And so these are reasons, but there's a story behind it. And the story is that in the very beginning of the yajna, they didn't offer bhog. But there was a time when there was no money and no food. And Brahma Baba was wondering, how come it got in this situation? Because in all the legends, for example, the legends of the Pandavas and Draupadi, Draupadi's pot was always full and there was always food. But then Baba said, well, what we need to do is we need to offer bhog so that we can ensure that our karma with God is correct. And so he is providing us, but we need to acknowledge that. So it is a gesture to show that this relationship is like this. We are receiving, we are offering. That means acknowledging. God doesn't eat. Sometimes people say, why do we offer to God if he doesn't eat? but it's not really like that. It's a matter of bringing him into the loops, because we have said we will have all relationships with God. So the most intense relationship are your relationship with your parents, who are your providers, and God is our Father, so he's our provider, and so we offer bhog because of that. And there was another thing too, which is interesting, and that is that in the process of offering bhog and eating in remembrance, many of the sisters would go in trance and experience trance visions in the process of offering bhog. So it was another way of getting close to God in an internal trance experience. Many reasons to offer bhog. And there's another one I can tell you, which is a very interesting one. When you offer bhog to God, you create a dome of light over your place where you're doing this, your home, your center. And this dome of light is something that like protects you from negative influences, from danger, from damage, from many things. It really intensifies the spiritual atmosphere, and this dome of light as a barrier that stops any negative energy coming in. I bet most people didn't know that, right?
That's true. Yes. Of protection around us. Yes. And what about Sakash, Denisben?
Sakash. Sakash is the atmosphere of remembrance, which is directed. And, people have a lot of faith, a lot of beliefs that, they want blessings, they want special energy. And so they get very focused on that. One of the things that Baba has asked us to do is to receive and transmit the energy that comes from him, because not everybody can perceive God, not everybody can focus their mind on God, even if they would like to, but it's a privilege to be able to. And so Baba has asked us to be conduits, so you receive and you radiate out. And that radiance is sakash to the world. And when you have very strong yoga, then the radiance that you put out is correspondingly strong. So that's what he wants us to do. Because he says, okay, you receive from me, but it's not only for you, it's for everyone as well. So you become a reflector of God's light and love and purity.
That's how we become God's helper too, because we're helping the world through his vibrations. Okay, so here's another question. What does it mean when you said that when you use your third eye, you should have both eyes open?
Well, a third eye is going to add to what you can see. Now, sometimes people understand and interpret these things in ways that are quite different from how Baba has intended it. So I think what I mean by keeping your two eyes open is be absolutely in touch with and grounded in the real reality that's around you, and not fly off into a fairyland, because there are people who do that. So no, you have to be down here and grounded and quite aware of everything and everyone that's going on. And at the same time, the third eye is to be able to see what you cannot see with two eyes. That means you can perceive the soul, you can understand the past, present, and future, the trend of circumstances. You can be aware of God. You can understand the philosophy of karma, because it's also called the third eye of knowledge. So you need to perceive real reality through your senses, but you do not need to be deceived by the senses. So if you are able to see the visible as well as the invisible, then you have full spectrum of perception. That's what I mean by all three eyes should be open.
That's true. That's why Baba says be active and alert, with also having the remembrance. So not zoning out and not being aware of what's happening around. Yes. So here's an interesting question, Denise Ben. It says, where do you draw the line between taking a stand against injustice and not intervening in others settling their karmic accounts?
Well, I think those two things are really very different, and there isn't a line between them. There may be circumstances where you are unsure about what you should do when you're in a particular circumstance. But there are times when there's nothing you can do. And at such a time, then you have to accept that circumstances are outside your control, it's beyond your range, beyond your expertise, beyond your power. And there may be at the same time something that you can do, but not necessarily to protect somebody from their circumstances or interfere with their settlement of karma. There are many circumstances that happen to people. Someone could be in danger, someone could be ill. There are situations where there's violence, and it's not advisable to go in between a shooter and a victim, because then the bullet will stop at your body. So that's not very smart. So you have to ascertain what is appropriate, and you have to also look at your motivation, because if there is a situation where you can help and somebody needs your help, then you must help. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if it is a karmic account that's getting settled, that you can stop that from happening. The karmic account will get settled one way or the other. But if somebody needs help and you can give help, then you must do it. Don't just stand there and watch somebody drown. But don't jump in the water if you can't swim, because then both of you will go. And so it's really about being wise and understanding that if you can do, and if you can't, then there's nothing you can do. And there is an expression which is used in addiction recovery, which is quite important to know about. And that is, you can't stop it, you can't change it. And there's a third one, I can't remember what it is, but it's to do with people who behave in a certain way that under their own compulsion, and they do things which are not good for themselves, not good for their relationships, but they're very stubborn and fixed in that way of acting, and it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to make any difference. So there's no point trying to prevent people from doing something that's not good for them when they're insisting on doing it. because anyway, they'll turn against you if you do that.
That's true. All right, we'll move to the next question. And well, this is connected with the drama being predestined, which is always a question for many, and many are not able to come in terms with it. So the question here says, I am making effort, but I'm afraid to endure all the sufferings again.
Well, there is a saying that is in the Bhagavad Gita, which is very well known. And the saying is that whatever is predestined is what's happening. And then within the Brahma Kumari knowledge, it is said that everything repeats identically. And if you're afraid or not afraid, but you will have to go through whatever you have to go through. And you have to go through now. So the problem is you're afraid. And you're afraid because it's very hard for you to manage it, for you to endure it. And you don't want to have to go through that again because it's very hard. And when you know how hard it is, you don't want to do that. But there's a message in here which is really quite deep. And that is that if you're willing to go through it, it means that your relationship with that hardship and pain is different. If you're unwilling, you have an antagonistic relationship with this bad things that happen. And when you are against the bad things, it makes them worse. But it's like a kind of law of spirituality that when you're willing to go through it again and you're okay with it, then your relationship with it is not antagonistic, and everything is for a reason. And what you need to understand is the reason behind it, because there's always a message. Pain is a messenger, and it has something to tell you, and you need to listen carefully. What is this situation, this circumstance? What's it telling me? Because definitely this is happening because you invoked it. And if you invoke something that you don't like, but you still invoked it and you still don't like it, so your relationship with it is not deep, it's very surface relationship. So when you say, okay, I'm willing to understand this, what's this message, even if it's really terrible, but I'm willing, then your relationship with pain becomes much more positive. And you may think, well, I don't know about this. I don't really want to have a positive relationship with pain, but sit with it, think about it, because it's actually very important to consider this. Pain is a great, great teacher, and it is a wonderful instrument to carry you forward. And if you don't carry forward, then you're just stuck doing the same old thing, which continues to invoke more and more intense pain because you're not getting the message. So it has to push it to you harder. So if you stop resisting and listen to the message and be more open to what's going on, to understand what it wants to tell you, that's something really great that you're doing for yourself.
That's very true. Have a good relationship with even your pain, because it's a good indicator of what we need to learn. Yes. So Denise Pan, there's another question here which says, are our karmic accounts with Brahmin family any different from those with others? Which I really, from what it looks like, the question says, are they more severe if it's with Brahmin souls? Or is it the same?
Well, if you look at the knowledge, what it says is that the souls who come into this Brahmin family are ancient devotees, they are former deities, they have many, many lives, all of them. And so when you have many lives, it can be complicated. The intricacies of karmic bondages and connections are very massive. And so I would say that our karmic connections with Brahmin souls are more than with people who have not had so many births. And maybe we have debts with each other which are much more intense than we have with other people. But, you know, it's very difficult to generalize in these matters because you only know what you have in this birth. You don't know about previous births. When you study the knowledge, you have a theoretical understanding, and you want to bring that theoretical understanding deeper into yourself so that you can feel it and sense how you should function when you're in the circumstances of being in a relationship with people with whom there is a lot of karmic account. And when you're in this gathering, it will trigger whatever your weaknesses are. And so one is karmic accounts with people, that's one thing. But the other thing is that the gathering is specially designed to trigger your weaknesses, because if it doesn't trigger your weaknesses, you won't know what they are. And then you can't work on them. So I think that's a very important element of it, which is not really anything to do with karmic accounts, but that these souls have been specially placed, you know, because you don't live with all the Brahmins, you live with particular Brahmins, or you interact with particular Brahmins who are specially designed to trigger your weaknesses. And if you don't get your weaknesses triggered, you won't be able to know that they're there, and you will think you don't have any. But it comes again and again and again and again, so that you can come into your power and not fall into those traps every time, you know?
Given the many recent calamities that are affecting our communities, what is the karmic impact of giving to charities? And also a related question is, there's so much of suffering going on at the moment. What should be my attitude for such pain?
What is your attitude, you know? If there is something happening right around you, for example, I'm speaking from Anubhuti Retreat Center, and I think it was last year there were very severe fires around the area, and some entire towns were burnt to the ground. And so many people had nowhere to go, nowhere to live, because their house was just went up in flames. And so we invited many to come here and stay, because what to do when there's a disaster right there? You said our community. So our community is who's right around us. And then provide food and shelter and company and support, moral support, spiritual support. It's a very, very good thing to do. Some people, they respond to advertisements and fundraising for charities which are doing work in different places where there are difficulties. And Baba doesn't really recommend us to support those because the money that we may send, you know, a big proportion of it goes to administrative expenses, and you don't know if it'll really reach the intended people. And so Baba says, anyway, when you're doing spiritual service, you're anyway doing charity, you're anyway investing in Baba's work. And Baba is doing things that people cannot do for the benefit of the world. So if you put your time and energy in a human charity, karmically, it will give you maybe a little bit of return and do a little bit of benefit. But if you invest in Baba's work and participate in Baba's work, it's really a much more greater impact on you in terms of karma and on the beneficiaries. So this is why we do this. You know, because God is not the same as a human charity. And he doesn't have administrative expenses. All of us are volunteers. We don't have paid volunteers, as far as I know.
That's very true. So then he spent, here's a question. So this is on how the soul was meditating and having good results, but all of a sudden, nowadays, not able to remember Baba and not able to focus. So what advice can you give to the soul?
Well, you need to understand that Raj Yoga is a purification process. And one of the Jyotirlingam Shiva temples is Vaidyanath. You know this? Vaidyanath. It means that God is the Ayurvedic doctor. And so that means that when you take his medicine and you do yoga, it will cause all of your poison in your system to erupt because it has to pass out of your system. And so when you do really good yoga and then you have really bad Maya afterwards, it means that you're doing the right thing, but you just have to not bother about the really bad Maya, but just understand it's passing out of your system. So that's why it's going on like that. So just let it out. And if you find that you are unable to remember Baba, there's something blocking you, you have to have a look at what you're doing and just really evaluate your daily routine. Are you following Shrimat? Or what are you doing that's against Shrimat? Because if a BK is not doing the right thing, Baba will very often block them from contact with him so that they get the point that you're not doing the right thing, or there's something you're doing which is not right and you're deceiving yourself. And this is quite common that people experience when they're not doing the right thing. They can't get through to Baba. And sometimes it's not that, but sometimes it's just that Baba is testing you and seeing if you will just persist and get through. And it means he wants you to do more intensive tapasya to actually get yourself to the level of yoga that is needed, and that maybe he's indicating to you that you're being too casual about it. And you need to put more energy into it, focus more, give more attention to what this is. And also you need to study deeply. Just if you study superficially, it won't be enough to get you into yoga. You have to study deeply, because the progression is gyan, then yoga, then dharana, then service. And if we maybe are too focused on service, because service is very physical, it's very easy, and then we're out of balance, then the sign of that would be that the yoga would not be working out. So there's a few different reasons, and you have to investigate, check your chart and see what's going on, and then you can maybe detect, I'm doing this not right, so I have to do this right.
Right. So it's for us to go a step further and take this as as a lesson that I am supposed to accelerate in terms of my remembrance, have more powerful remembrance with Baba. So here, this is a question, and this is about children. They go through a sensitive time when they are under much of peer pressure, and they may misbehave with parents. They may be disrespectful. So what is it that I should be doing as a parent?
Well, it's very common for all parents to expect their children to do whatever they want them to do. And there comes a time in a child's life where they need to break away from just doing whatever they're told to do, because they need to find out their own identity. So Baba used to say about naughty children that it's a sign that they're very intelligent, and that you should not be worried about it, because they're finding themselves, they're finding what their limits are, and what they need is love and structure. And if you demand respect but you don't command it, then the problem is not with the children, it's with you. You see? So maybe you're not listening to your child, maybe you're not in contact with your child sufficiently. There are many, many things going on, but a lot of the time, parents look at their children as objects, and they don't realize that from a spiritual point of view, there's no age difference, because every soul is the same age as every other soul. And so you want somebody to respect you. They will give you respect out of politeness to a certain extent, but then if they don't actually respect you, they won't keep it up indefinitely. So for a child to respect you, you have to be in your own self-respect. And if you go out of order and get angry with a child who's not respecting you, that's not going to make that child respect you. It's going to make that child disrespect you more, because you're creating distance between yourself and that child. So you really need to have a relationship with that child soul to soul, so that that child doesn't feel like an object, but feels that you can see the soul and feel the soul and know the soul. And then you raise that child. You have to be sensitive when the child is being a child and they need protection. You have to be sensitive when that child is trying to become an adult and doesn't quite know what to do. It's very hard to grow up, especially in the world of today, and especially where your prospects are not looking good, because the world is falling apart, and many children are very depressed and anxious about that, and you need to be sensitive to that.
So if we maintain our self-respect, that will enable the child to have respect towards us. And the more we have the pure vibrations and the more we see them in the awareness of their souls, that can make a difference in our interactions. So Denise Penn, here's a question on funeral services. It is said that nowadays people spend a lot of money on funerals and gravestones to memorize a person. Is it necessary to have a gravestone for a body? If we don't have it, people will think we are disrespectful. So how do we balance that out?
You have to figure it out. That's quite easy. You decide, and you do, because the person who has died means something to a lot of people. And you have to decide what regard and respect you want to give to the memory of that person. And you also have to see what are the conventions around in your community, in your society. You know, if you're a Hindu, there'll be cremation. And you put the ashes in the Ganges, which is a bit far away from here, but the ocean is closer. And, you know, and you remember that soul on their death anniversary. This is very common. If you are a Muslim, Christian, Jew, you'll bury and you keep a gravestone according to your financial capacity. And some people, they create urns. There are many different ways. There's creative ways. Some people, they will bury a person and put a tree on top, and then the person comes through the tree in terms of the remains are fertilizing that tree. So some people do that. And so you see what you want to do. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Denise Penn, there are some questions which are again on the drama and about the drama repeating. So it seems like even the questions based on drama are repeating. So any take on why these questions are being asked again, even though answers have been given, clarifications have been given, anything that you'd like to share further on this?
It's really because people think it's either this or that. But the knowledge of the drama puts you in front of paradox. And there are very few people who can handle paradox. So it's not surprising that people say, you know, it's either this or it's that. Don't tell me it's both. It can't be both. And yet Baba is saying there's a paradox here. And so you just really need to think about paradox. And it takes a long, long time of a lot of deep thought to really grasp this. You know, there are many people, they say this is easy Raj Yoga. And then the people who come along and study easy Raj Yoga assume that it's easy in the sense of anybody can understand it, but it's not particularly easy Raj Yoga at all. When I first discovered about Raj Yoga, I heard that it was the most difficult thing that it's possible to undertake, the most difficult thing there is. And I said, well, in that case, it's worth doing. And later I heard this is easy Raj Yoga, but I never really found it to be particularly easy. And that people who talk about simple Raj Yoga or simplified Raj Yoga, I say, well, okay, if that's what you like, but I don't like things that are simplified if they're actually not simple. They're very deep, they're very complex, they're very subtle. And so that's my relationship with it. But I did find another interesting meaning of the word sahaj other than easy. If you look at some of these words that Baba uses in the dictionaries, you can find that there's several meanings. And one meaning that I like, especially for sahaj yoga, is that it is you're doing this practice in the context of other people, which means karmic accounts, which means it's not easy at all. So, but Baba says, think of it as simple in that, you know, all you have to do is follow Shrimat and understand that everything is round and round and up and down, and that you are here to take power from God, settle your accounts, and create your fortune. So that's fairly simple. But then when it comes to actually doing it, it's not simple at all. It's very complicated. But if it was all that simple, then you'd get bored after the first 2 or 3 years. But this is a long journey which lasts your whole life. So if it's too simple, you'd do something else. But it's so complicated and so complex that it keeps you interested for the whole life. So that's not bad.
Not bad at all. There's new things to learn every day. Yes. So, Dedispan, I know we're almost reaching 6 p.m., but if you have a few minutes more, there's another question.
Mm-hmm.
And the question really is that one is devotion and the other is knowledge. And definitely on the path of devotion, we have the bhavna towards God, and that bhavna should still be there in us. But what are the other things that we have to keep in mind that now, we have moved from bhakti into gyan? We have now, changed our path. So what are some of the things that we need to keep in our mind?
Well, it is said that you can't really come into gyan until you've finished bhakti. And it is also said in the Murlis that do not tell a person not to engage in bhakti. Because if you do that, they're not in gyan and they're not in bhakti. So you put them in limbo, which is not a very good thing to do. So a person comes to God with a lot of faith, and you may recognize Baba to a percentage, and you may recognize Gyan to a percentage. You may struggle with some of it. You may or may not be able to work with paradox. Partly your loyalty is with Baba, partly your loyalty is with your society that you live in. And it's very important to let people take power and take strength and gradually understand what this is, because it's not like what you hear in this 7 days course is a bare skeleton, and then you go into the Murli and you don't really know what to do with that, because it doesn't go easily, 7-day course to the Murli for most people. There are some who just go smoothly into the whole thing, and they just feel comfortable with all of it just like that. But it's not the majority. And you don't know just by looking at a person, is that person having 84 births? You don't know. So we need to expose people to this knowledge and encourage them to participate and meditate and just let it sink in. And if there is an attribute of bhakti that is no longer doing it for that person, then they will anyway gradually shift over. And so you really have to see, who do you have in front of you? And then you also have to, if you're going to say, okay, you're a teacher of Raj Yoga and you want this person to understand it, you have to really go to where they are and then go with them, accompany them step by step to where they could be. And for that, Baba says you have to feel the pulse. So if you don't serve them adequately, they won't be able to progress. And if you force them where you shouldn't force them, they also won't be able to progress. So your function as a Raj Yoga teacher is to really understand their soul and do what is going to help that person to progress. And everyone is different. So it's like, in some ways, like being a doctor. Different people come to you, maybe 10 people come to you with a headache, but there's 10 different types of headaches. And you can't just give an aspirin to 10 people and think all the headaches will go away. It doesn't work like that.
That's true. And this was supposed to be the last question that I was supposed to ask you. But now just one more question popped up in the chat box, and I think it's worth for everyone to listen to. So the question is, who is Dharamraj?
Who is Dharmaraj? Well, Dharmaraj isn't necessarily a who. It's a what. Can be a who, but it's also a what. The Dharmaraj as a what is the rule of righteousness. And so there are, it's really all to do with the philosophy of karma, that no one can get away with anything. Everyone is accountable. So Dharmaraj is you get called to account. That's Dharmaraj. And so an attitude that is really quite good to have when you're doing this practice, which is all about becoming true Narayan, that means becoming honest. So you want to be honest, then that means you want to activate your conscience. And when you go against your conscience, then your conscience will no longer serve you. And the best guide you have is your conscience. And what Baba says and what your conscience says mostly is in line with each other. But what Baba says and what people say is not always the same thing at all. And what your conscience says and what people say is also not very often the same thing. And this is why Baba talks about Paramat and Shrimat. And, there are people, it will be convenient for them to get you to behave in a certain way, but it will also be against your conscience. And then when you're called to account, sooner or later, question will be asked, you knew this wasn't right and you did it anyway. Why? And then you have to answer. Why? You were afraid, or you didn't want to upset somebody, or why? That's Dharmaraj. You did this. Why? And then also the consequences are Dharmaraj. You do something, the law of karma wants to equalize things. So if you do something bad over here, then there's a payment over the other side, which has to compensate. And so you have to pay. That is Dharmaraj. There's also Dharmaraj for BKs, which is again different, because for BKs, you've been taught by God. And so your accountability is different from non-BKs, because non-BKs, they just know what the religions say and they know what the law says, but they don't really know what God says. But if you're a BK, you do know what God says. And if you make a promise to God that, yeah, I understand, and I will do this, 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 and this, and I will be your helper and your representative, and then you go against that, then there will be a greater fine to pay, because you should know better. And so you will come in front of Brahma Baba in the Avyakt form, who will give you CCTV footage in the form of a vision. This is what you did now. What do you have to say for yourself? And here are the consequences. So that's a reality.
Wonderful. So, yeah, I think we really got to get some very good answers to the questions that were asked during the retreat, and also some which people had shared. And I think the point that I'm really going to take with me is about paradox, contradictory statements, and how willing are we to work with these contradictory statements.
Well, no, contradiction is different. Paradox is different.
Paradox is different. Okay.
So you have to sit with the dictionary, look at contradiction, look at paradox, and see which is what. Because the big paradox of drama is everything is destined and you must choose. And how are you going to deal with that? That means you have to go deep and deep and deep into the knowledge of drama and into the exercise of choice, which if you do not choose when you have to choose, that's a mistake. And if you choose when you don't have to choose, that's a mistake. It's not so easy, Raj Yoga, I tell you.
That's true. Especially when you're trying to dive deeper into knowledge.
Yes.
All right. So I think we can finish up here. And now I'm sure that all of us got some really good answers, and we'll reflect on what was shared. That's most important. So, Sister Denise, can you lead us into a meditation, and then we'll end with silence. And thank you again for joining us tonight. Om Shanti.
Thank you. Om Shanti. So give yourself a moment to just become calm and turn within. And just feel your being, yourself, your soul. Know that you are a pure being of light. And everything is as it should be. There are moments where you are called to action. Other moments where There's nothing you can do. You have to just be quiet. But the most important is to continue to take strength from Baba. Go deep within, because then you're on the same level as Baba. Detach from the body. Detach from the drama. It is just yourself and Baba, no one else. Let it be like that. This will make you free, and this makes you a master. Om Shanti. Thank you.
Are you all satisfied? I'm sure no more question, yes? Everybody happy?
Very happy. Thank you, Ben. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Thank you, Dinis Ben. Thank you, Gita Ben.
Thank you. Have a good night and a good Christmas.